Machuca tells the story of two boys during the last few days of Salvador Allende's presidency in Chile and the first view of Augusto Pinochet. It's a tale of friendship, first love, and loss, all tied together under a climate of social unrest and political instability. Although this movie brings to light many important questions, today we are going to address this one. How does the film Machuca help our historical understanding of Chile in the 1970s through social, political, and cultural interpretations? I know, big question, so let's break it down a bit. So what is historical understanding? Of course, to understand history, we need to know some basic facts. Who is involved? When did it happen? Where? Why? How? So it seems like the most effective movie genre to gain a better historical understanding would be a documentary. However, following Rosenstone, this is not necessarily the case. A documentary is a great way to deliver a lot of information, and it can even be a way for us to nostalgically view the past, but it lacks the emotional urgency and audience connection of a dramatic film. This ability to emotionally connect to the audience is one of the most important aspects of historical understanding. We better understand history when we can feel the feelings of those at the time, or, in the least, understand them. So why does it help our historical understanding of this time in Chile that Machuca is a fictional film based historically, rather than a documentary, a dramatization of true events, or even a historical text? To answer this, there is one important and small part of the film: condensed milk. Condensed milk in Machuca represents shortage, the normalcy of the black market, and for Gonzalo, Silvana, and Machuca, it represents indulgence. Rather than taking the scarcely available milk back to their families, they enjoyed it themselves. Now, in terms of historical fact, do we know if there were 3 friends during this time who drank condensed milk together? Of course not. But it helps our historical understanding because of what it symbolizes, both of the time period and to the characters. Even if it was mentioned in a historical text that many people bought and used condensed milk from the black market at this time because they did not have any other options, it would not convey the larger message that it does in Machuca. And however sweet it may be, condensed milk isn't the only aspect of the film that helps to reinforce our historical understanding of events. In fact, Machuca is chock full of relevant and symbolic imagery, which in turn helps us to better realize the social processes of the time, as well as all the political and cultural drama that come along with it. To delve a little deeper into this theme, let's start with something basic and everyday, like the clothing of Gonzalo and Machuca. The stark differences between their attire speak lengths about the social inequality that plagues the nation. Gonzalo has swim trunks, Machuca swims in his underwear. Gonzalo never wears his new Adidas, while Machuca clutches them like a prize. At school, Gonzalo is neatly groomed in his jacket, tie and button down, while Machuca comes in wearing a torn sweater. These images detail the divided classes and mirror the inequality that ruled socialist Chile in a way that a history textbook could never do. While written text about the time might approach the subject with a list of stats, or maybe even graph out a few data points, Machuca as a film brings us past those points and deeper, into a space where we can understand how this information played out in the daily lives of Chilean families and impacted them in a way so that even their children's routines were affected. Going further, let's take a look at the screen within the screen, that is, what's playing on Gonzalo's TV. Throughout the film, we're able to catch glimpses of headlines as the family watches the news, one of which tells of Allende's visit to the Kremlin, the first Chilean president to have done so. This subtle imagery goes to great lengths in filling us in on the politics of the time. By this point, Allende had nationalized large-scale industries such as copper, which eventually led to a drop in exports in a quickly declining Chilean economy. These practices weren't exactly popular with the United States, but they did earn Chile some investments from the USSR, although not much. Allende's visit to the Kremlin in 1972 was with the aim of gaining more Soviet aid, and thus its broadcast in Machuca was a sign that economically things were looking grim for Allende's government. His policies of nationalization were failing, and Chilean families were feeling it. Later in the film, immediately after the coup, we find Gonzalo distressed about the killing of some stray dogs just outside his apartment. On a larger scale, we can interpret this scene as a representation of Pinochet's immediate and exhaustive measures to turn back Allende's Chile into one ruled by order, structure, and tradition. And, of course, the disappearance of dogs off the streets foreshadows the impending disappearance of human beings, a chilling effect that will be impossible for historical text to accomplish. So why does this all matter? What is the director trying to tell us? Historically speaking, Machuca matters because it demonstrates that a fictional film can offer insight into events that happened in the past, and through a perspective that would be unfeasible in a historical text. That is, with the unfamiliar perspective of a child. Of course, the film still walks us through all the important historical events that a textbook might, through a failed program of nationalization, through the resulting food shortages and black market, through a visit to the Kremlin, the installation of a military regime, and even through the disappearances of people and whole families. Perhaps most importantly, however, it shows us how these events manifested themselves in the lives of regular people, and it shows us how they affected those who lived through them. For many, the main consequence is one that can be summed up through the character of Gonzalo, its result being a striking and rather abrupt end to innocence. Furthermore, the fact that this film was released in 2004, over 30 years after the military coup, in and of itself demonstrates that this end to innocence is not something that's forgotten with time. Rather, it's a theme that continues to be of importance in a culture whose main battle is that against forgetting. When it all comes down to it, it's just about apples and pears. As Machuca's mom pointed out, and Alcazar reinforces, there are only two types of people in the world, those who blame and those who accept the guilt. Throughout the film, Gonzalo and Machuca worked to show that Chile's society did not have to be this way. Although the film showed that it is possible to form personal relationships and even friendships across differences, in the end it claims that the differences will not go away. Gonzalo stands in front of the soldier and says, "Look at me." When he says this, and when the soldier acknowledges there is a difference between Gonzalo and the people living in Machuca's neighborhood, the director is trying to tell us that through the contributing social, political, and cultural factors in Chile at that time, it was impossible to be anything other than an apple or a pear, and that it was incredibly difficult for the two to exist without conflict.